Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here again taking interesting sources you send our way and, well, digging into them to pull out the key insights.
And today we've got a really interesting contrast, a sort of head-to-head. It's an op-ed from a Dr. Watt about leadership at Wat Lao Budavong, that's a Buddhist temple.
Right, and then we have a direct response from a Dr. T reacting to Dr. Watt's piece.
Yeah, and Dr. Watt really kicks things off with a big question, doesn't he? He asks, basically, does the leader of a Buddhist temple need deep scholarly Buddhist knowledge?
Or, he wonders, are things like core leadership skills, competence and strong ethics maybe enough?
Exactly. But then Dr. T comes in pretty firmly disagreeing. He argues that, no, actually, a good understanding of Buddhist teachings is essential. Absolutely vital for leading a Buddhist organization.
So that's our mission today, really, to unpack these two different viewpoints, understand the arguments they're making. Let's start with Dr. Watt's op-ed first.
Okay, so Dr. Watt, he starts by sort of questioning this idea that a temple leader needs to be an expert on, well, everything Buddhist scripture-wise.
Yeah.
His main point seems to be that for leadership at Wat Lao Budavong, the priority should be on practical skills, competence, ethics, community commitment, maybe even over that really deep academic Buddhist knowledge.
He talks about competency over perfection, which I think is a pretty grounded way to put it. His point is, look, nobody knows everything, right? Even really devout people.
Right.
So instead of getting, bogged down in who knows the most doctrine, Dr. Watt focuses on the skills needed day to day to keep the temple running smoothly.
Things like organizational skills.
Yep. Organization, building community spirit, handling the finances responsibly, and crucially, resolving conflicts when they pop up.
Which are all, undeniably important for keeping any group going, let alone a temple. He's really focusing on the practical side of things.
Then he gets into this idea of faith and shared values.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets quite thought-provoking, I think. Dr. Watt basically suggests that leading a Buddhist temple doesn't have to be someone who's been a Buddhist their whole life.
He points out that core values like compassion, mindfulness, being ethical, you find those in lots of traditions, right? Then he mentions Christianity, Hinduism, Islam specifically.
And so his argument is, well, maybe a leader from a different background could still effectively lead a Buddhist temple as long as they embody those shared values, kindness, patience, service.
It's an interesting take. He's saying judge the leadership by its ability to foster harmony and wisdom, not just by the label.
Yeah, it's quite an inclusive perspective.
Yeah.
And he builds on that by talking about the essence of Buddhism being compassion, not judgment.
Right. He emphasizes compassion, acceptance, non-attachment, these core Buddhist ideas.
So from that view, leaders shouldn't really be criticized if they don't know every single detail, but should be valued for what they contribute positively.
And he connects this to the idea that learning is lifelong, even for Buddhist monks. They're always deepening their understanding.
Exactly. So for Dr. Watt, what seems really crucial is that willingness to listen, to learn, and to serve humbly. Yeah. Not necessarily having all the answers from day one.
He then kind of sums it up by outlining these core qualities for leadership. He calls it leadership rooted in strength and integrity.
Which includes things like ethical integrity, honesty, transparent.
Transparently responsible, yeah. And community engagement, supporting people, fostering unity.
Plus, having vision, leadership skills for the long term, and importantly, respect for Buddhist values, even without that deep scholarly background.
So if we boil Dr. Watt's argument down, it's really that wisdom, humility, and service come first.
Yeah.
A temple thrives, in his view, because of community commitment and inspiring leadership, not necessarily because the leader is the top scholar on Buddhist texts.
Okay, so that gives us a good picture of Dr. Watt's position. Now let's shift to Dr. T's response.
And right away, Dr. T signals strong disagreement. He says Dr. Watt's idea about not needing deep Buddhist knowledge is, quote, more wrong than right. So, pretty direct.
No ambiguity there.
No. And his core counterargument is built on the idea that a Buddhist organization is unique. It's not just any club or association.
He says the name itself, Wat Lao Budavong, signifies its Buddhist identity.
Precisely. And therefore, he argues, a solid understanding and, importantly, practice of Buddhist teachings isn't just nice to have, it's absolutely essential for the leader.
He gets quite specific, too. He refers to the Buddha outlining 7 qualities for a leader and points out that the very first one is vast learning.
Right. And he uses these analogies like You need law school to be a lawyer.
Or medical school to be a doctor.
Exactly. So he says you need to properly know and practice Buddhism to lead a Buddhist organization. It's that specific knowledge for a specific role.
It's a very clear comparison he's drawing there.
Very. Then Dr. T makes another key distinction, knowing the teachings versus actually practicing them.
Ah, okay. How does he illustrate that?
He uses the example of the 5 precepts. Now, these are fundamental ethical guidelines in Buddhism, nonviolence, honesty, things like that.
Right. Often recited.
Yes, recited monthly in their community, he says. But then he shares this anecdote where he asked a monk, how many people actually keep these precepts perfectly?
And the answer was?
The monk apparently said, not many, maybe none.
Wow. Okay.
And Dr. T uses this to highlight his concern about what he calls fake or semi or just called or not good Buddhist.
So he's saying just identifying as Buddhist or knowing the basics isn't enough, especially for a leader.
Exactly. For Dr. T, being a good Buddhist, particularly in a leadership context, really comes down to 2 things.
Which are?
1, consistently observing those 5 precepts we mentioned, and 2, taking refuge in the triple gem, that's the Buddha, the Dharma, his teachings, and the Sangha, the community.
Okay, so precepts and refuge. Got it.
Then he tackles that common idea, the one Dr. Watt touched on, that basically all religions teach goodness.
Yeah, the shared values point.
Dr. T agrees, well, sort of, on a basic level, but he argues Buddhism aims higher for a better good and the best.
A better good and the best. How does he explain that?
He lays out a kind of progression. Observing the precepts, that's good. Teaching them to others, that's better.
And the best.
Eradicating your own mental defilements, your impurities, that's the noble path, he says.
Okay, so it's a tiered system of goodness, in his view.
Right. And he specifically brings up the Noble Eightfold Path from Buddhist teaching, saying following this path makes one a noble person.
And he claims this specific path is unique to Buddhism.
He suggests its specificity is unique, yes. And then he throws out that question, almost challenging the reader, or perhaps Dr. Watt. Do you know what the Noble Eightfold Path is?
That's pointed.
Right.
It really underscores his emphasis on needing that specific Buddhist knowledge.
Definitely. It pushes back hard against the idea that general ethics are sufficient within this specific context.
Okay, and what about unity? Dr. Watt mentioned community building. How does Dr. T address that?
Well, he argues that unity itself isn't inherently good or bad. It's neutral.
Neutral, how so?
He gives some pretty stark historical examples. Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan. He says they had unity, but it was unity for destructive ends. Scorched Earth Berlin, Hiroshima. Those were outcomes of unity among, as he puts it, bad people.
Oof, that's a strong point.
It is. He contrasts that with what he calls the unity of noble people, like in the Buddha's original Sangha, which he says was characterized by harmony and lack of conflict because it was based on shared noble principles.
So it's not just unity, but what kind of unity? Grounded in what principles?
Exactly. The quality of the unity matters deeply for him, and he wraps up his argument by quoting the Buddha, apparently saying something like, anyone who doesn't know the subject properly, he will make misstates performing his duties in that organization.
That's a pretty direct warning about leadership without specific knowledge.
It really encapsulates his core stance.
Okay, so stepping back and looking at both arguments, the core tension seems pretty clear, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really is competence and general ethics, maybe universal values on one side.
That's Dr. Watt's emphasis.
Right. Versus Dr. T, who insists on the necessity of deep, practiced, specific religious knowledge and adherence for leading a religious organization.
They definitely prioritize different things for what makes leadership effective in this particular setting, a Buddhist temple.
Dr. Watt's looking at the practical management, the community cohesion through shared, perhaps broader values. Dr. T is focused squarely on the doctrinal foundation, the specific Buddhist practices and knowledge he believes are non-negotiable.
But it's worth noting, isn't it, that both of them seem genuinely concerned about the temple, about Wat Lao Budavong flourishing.
Oh, absolutely. Their goal seems aligned to the health and success of the temple. They just have very different ideas about the path to get there.
It really shows how tricky defining effective leadership can be, especially when you layer in specific cultural and religious factors.
Oh, easy answers.
So, as you've been listening to this back and forth, here's something maybe to mull over. Thinking about these arguments, what do you think are the absolutely essential qualities for leading any group, any community, or organization?
Yeah, is that specific subject expertise always the number one thing? Or do other factors like those ethical foundations or general leadership skills sometimes carry more weight?
It's a tough balance, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely something worth thinking more about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.